Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know, we're always diving into fascinating areas of health, and today is no exception. We're going to be exploring a connection you might not expect, the link between diabetes and thiamine.
Thiamine? You mean vitamin B1, right?
That's the one. And as you know,
yeah.
It's super important for how our bodies use carbohydrates for energy. And, well, with diabetes, it's all about the body's ability to, regulate that blood sugar.
It's all tied together, isn't it?
Exactly. And we've got some really interesting research to dig into today. It's a study that was just published last month, actually, on September 29th in Curios.
Oh, very recent.
Yeah, by Mohammadouluzer Khan and their team. They looked at thiamine levels in people with both type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
Okay. So when we talk about measuring thiamine levels, it's not as simple as it might seem at first glance.
Okay.
There are a couple of ways to do it. You can measure thiamine metabolites, or you can do something called an erythrocyte transcatalyase assay.
The ETK assay.
Right.
I've heard of that. So that's not just looking at how much thiamine is there, it's kind of looking at how well it's actually working, right?
That's a good way to put it. It gives us a better idea of the vitamin's functionality.
I like that. Functionality. So this study, did they use the ETK assay?
They did. And they designed a case control study comparing 3 groups: type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and a control group of healthy individuals.
And this research was it done all in one place?
Yeah, they conducted it at a number of diabetic outpatient centers in Karachi.
Oh, interesting. And how many people were in the study?
They had a total of 90 participants, and they measured all sorts of things: blood glucose levels, lipid profiles, HDL, triglycerides, the whole 9 yards.
Wow, thorough. But of course, the big question is, what did they find? What were the results?
Well, the results were really quite striking. Both the type 1 and type 2 diabetes groups had significantly lower levels of thiamine than the healthy control group.
So that's a pretty clear difference right there.
Yeah, definitely suggests a connection, but it gets even more interesting. The folks with diabetes, they also had higher blood sugar levels, elevated triglycerides, and higher total cholesterol compared to the healthy controls.
So it's not just the blood sugar we usually think about with the diabetes. It's like there are these other things going on too.
Yeah, right. And don't forget about HDL, the good cholesterol.
Oh, right.
That was lower in both types of diabetes as well. So it's painting a bit of a concerning picture.
It is. But why is that? Why are the thiamine levels lower in people with diabetes? Like, what's happening there?
That's a great question. And, researchers are still exploring that, but one thought is that high blood sugar might actually increase how much thiamine the body gets rid of. So it's like it flushes it out,
Oh, interesting. So that could be a problem, right? Like, high blood sugar leads to less thiamine, and then less thiamine could make it even harder to control blood sugar.
Exactly. It could be a vicious cycle. And you know what else? They found a significant correlation between blood sugar levels and thiamine levels in the diabetic groups. Both HbA1c and fasting blood sugar were linked.
Hold on. What does that mean? Like, why is that correlation important?
Well, it really suggests that there's a connection between how well the body manages blood sugar and how much thiamine is available.
So that's huge, right? Because maybe if we can address the thiamine deficiency, then we can help people manage their diabetes better, potentially avoid some of those complications down the road.
That's what's so fascinating about this research. It really opens up new possibilities for how we think about and treat diabetes. We talk so much about diet and medication, but thiamine doesn't usually come up.
That's true. I mean, I know it's a vitamin, but I hadn't really thought about it in the context of diabetes before. This is pretty eye-opening. So what are we talking about here? Like, what kind of complications could happen if someone with diabetes is deficient in thiamine?
That's a great question, and it's definitely something we want to dive into. It's definitely something we need to talk about more, right? I mean, these potential complications.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little scary to think that something like a vitamin deficiency could make things so much harder for someone already dealing with diabetes.
It is a concern, and the researchers, they specifically talked about thiamine deficiency potentially making those vascular complications worse, like the heart disease, stroke, even kidney problems.
Oh, wow. That's serious stuff. And I think it's worth reminding our listeners, we're talking about things that could really impact their quality of life, like heart health, the risk of a stroke, even vision loss. It can all be tied back to these vascular complications. You're
absolutely right. These are major concerns for anyone with diabetes, and it all sort of leads to a really big question here. Could thiamine supplementation be the answer? Like, could it be a key part of managing diabetes?
That's a thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we hear so much about diet and medication, but I've got to say, thiamine supplements, I haven't heard that discussed much in the context of diabetes. So is it even safe? Like, what do we know about thiamine supplements?
Well, generally speaking, thiamine supplements are considered safe. You can find them pretty easily, often as part of those B-complex vitamins.
Okay. But I imagine it's still important to talk to a doctor first, right?
Oh, absolutely. Always consult with a healthcare professional. They can help figure out the right dosage and make sure there aren't any interactions with any other medications.
Right. Because everyone's different. You can't just take a one-size-fits-all approach.
That's so true. It's about personalized care. And beyond supplements, we shouldn't forget about getting thiamine from our diet.
Right. Food. What kind of foods are we talking about here? Like, if someone wants to get more thiamine naturally, what should they be eating?
Well, legumes are a fantastic source. Things like lentils and beans.
Okay.
Nuts and seeds are also great.
Okay. Those are easy to add to a meal.
Definitely. And of course, you've got your whole grains, brown rice, oatmeal, things like that.
Right. Whole grains. Always good.
And don't forget about lean meats, especially pork.
Oh, that's right. And I know a lot of people eat fortified cereals and bread too, right? Like, that's another way to get some extra thiamine.
Definitely. Fortified foods can be a really convenient way to bump up your intake, especially if you're not sure you're getting enough from your diet alone.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. We've talked about what thiamine is, how it works in the body, and how it might play a role in managing diabetes. But, before we move on, I think it's important to talk about limitations. Like, every study has limitations, right? What about this one?
Absolutely. We always want to be critical thinkers. And in this case, one thing to consider is that they used a non-probability sampling method.
So what does that mean for the results?
Well, it means there's a chance of selection bias.
Right.
The participants might not be perfectly representative of the larger population.
I see. And what about the number of people in the study? Did they mention anything about that?
They did, and that's another limitation. It was a relatively small sample size, just 90 participants.
Okay. So it's a good starting point, but we need more research, right? Like, with more people.
Exactly. Larger scale studies would really help confirm these findings, and, ideally, those studies would also involve longer follow-up periods.
All right. So we could see how things change over time.
Yeah, because we want to know, does maintaining healthy thiamine levels actually lead to fewer complications down the line? Does it reduce the risk of heart disease or nerve damage over the long term? That's where those long-term studies come in.
Okay, so lots more to learn. But even with what we know now, it sounds like there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah.
So what's the main takeaway for our listeners? What should they remember from all of this?
Don't underestimate the power of thiamine. We tend to forget about some of these essential vitamins.
It's easy to overlook them.
It is. But maintaining healthy levels, whether it's through diet or potentially supplements with your doctor's guidance, it could be really important for managing diabetes and reducing those complications.
Right, so it's not just about blood sugar control. It's about looking at the whole picture. And I think this research is really a call to action for people with diabetes, to talk to their doctor about thiamine, to think about how they can get more of it through their diet.
Yeah. It's about taking an active role in your health. And the more we understand about things like thiamine, the more empowered we are to make good decisions.
Absolutely. So lots to think about, and certainly more research to be done. But this is definitely a step in the right direction. It's opening up new possibilities and giving us a better understanding of how we can approach diabetes care.
And it's not just about individuals taking action, right? It really shows that we need more research in this area. Like, there's still so much we don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Like we mentioned, the study we talked about had some limitations. The sample size wasn't huge, and there's that possibility of selection bias. So what kind of research do we need to really get a better grasp on this whole thiamine diabetes connection?
We need bigger studies, that's for sure. Studies with more people, more diverse groups of people. We need to see if these findings hold up in different populations.
Right. Makes sense. And I imagine those larger studies would also help figure out, the dosage for thiamine supplements, like how much should people take, for how long, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Because right now we just don't have enough information to give those really specific personalized recommendations. We need more research to figure out what works best for different people.
Okay, so more research is definitely needed. But for our listeners who are, interested in learning more right now, where can they go? Like, what are some good resources for reliable information about thiamine and diabetes?
Well, the first and best step is always to talk to your doctor. They know your medical history. They can give you advice that's tailored to your specific needs.
Yeah, good point. Personalized advice is key. But are there any online resources that you recommend, like for people who want to do some of their own research?
Oh, absolutely. There are some great organizations out there. The American Diabetes Association, the National Institutes of Health, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They all have really good information on diabetes management. That includes things like dietary recommendations.
Okay, so those are all good places to start. And I know a lot of people use, websites like PubMed or Google Scholar to find research studies.
Those are great resources for sure. But it's important to remember not everything you read online is accurate or reliable.
Right. Always double check those sources. Make sure the information is up to date and that it aligns with what your doctor's telling you.
Exactly. It's about being an informed patient, taking charge of your health.
Well said. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. We've learned so much about thiamine, its role in the body, and its potential impact on diabetes. It's amazing to think that something as simple as a vitamin could play such a significant role. And, as we wrap things up, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that there's still so much to discover.
Yeah, it's true. This research on thiamine and diabetes, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We're learning new things all the time about how our bodies work and how to stay healthy.
It's exciting to think about what the future holds, what other connections and potential treatments are out there waiting to be found. And, it just emphasizes the importance of staying curious, of asking questions, of never stopping learning.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not a destination. And the more we know, the better equipped we are to take care of ourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of thiamine and diabetes. We hope you found it as fascinating as we did. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep taking care of your health.